Well, I'm not going to be mischaracterized, so I do have to explain what you're lying about.
Do you think they can legitimately
Megan,
believe this is an important issue?
so
No, I want you to answer this. Do you believe?
I'm about to
Look,
answer
it's
that
not as
question. I'm getting
disrespectful
to it,
as treating
Megan.
everything as a sneer.
You would recriminalize homosexuality.
I mean, if I could wave my magic wand as the Queen of the United States, I would.
Because what you're describing to me sounds like you are an enemy of human freedom. Have you ever engaged in oral sex with a man? The Pride Month backlash is here, and it kind of seems like everybody's losing their minds. No story better sums this up than the widespread meltdown and outrage over the San Francisco Giants Pride Night controversy. Now, whether it's the MLB or other professional sports, I've always kind of hated these annual June LGBT-focused events and games because they've always struck me as corporate pandering and virtue signaling, not backed up by any actual action to address the fact that most professional sports leagues have such homophobic cultures that they have no outspokenly gay athletes. And I've always been against the annoying and intolerant trend of targeting or bullying or harassing or in some cases even punishing professional athletes when they don't want to join in on the Pride Month celebrations. That's where the Giants come in. During their Pride Night game, most of the team wore Pride-themed hats, but one player chose to wear their regular hat, and then 3 did wear the Pride hats, but wrote Bible verses on them. These 3 were later warned by the MLB that doing this violates their unauthorized writings policy for the uniforms. Now, this has prompted widespread outrage from conservative media, claims of anti-Christian bias, and even the threat of federal investigation into the MLB. Oh, and of course, the 3 players who originally decided to write those Bible verses on those hats also prompted an unhinged meltdown from progressives with too much time on their hands. Frankly, to me, it's all tiresome wannabe victim nonsense. It's not some anti-LGBT hate crime for a player to decline to wear a hat or to write something in Sharpie on it. But these Christian players, contrary to the narrative you'll hear in much of conservative media, weren't actually forced to affirm the LGBT agenda or anything like that. They had the choice to wear the Pride-themed hats or to wear their regular hats from their regular uniform, and the player that chose to do that didn't face any official sanction or punishment from the league. And as far as the 3 who did get a warning are concerned, well, if a league has a content-neutral policy against unauthorized writings on uniforms, that's not anti-Christian discrimination. Now, this all comes in the context of a broader backlash against LGBT activism and LGBT rights that's particularly profound and vicious on some social media platforms like X and in certain pockets of right-wing media. But it's also showing up in decreasing public support in the polling. To me, it's clear we're living through something of a pendulum swing. Progressives and radical gender activists pushed way too far on many different questions related to activism, sex, gender, and biology, and viciously attacked, in many cases, people who dared disagree or dissent. But if you swim with the tides on Twitter these days, you'd come away thinking that we need to revert to 1950s morality and that Christians are the new oppressed class in America. Neither extreme actually reflects reality, and we desperately need to return to some kind of normal middle ground. That's just my take, and the debate is only just beginning. Joining me now, we've got the progressive YouTuber Luke Beasley, himself a proponent of the gay agenda, and the Daily Wire writer and conservative Megan Basham, who, it's an understatement to say, is not. Let's get into it. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks
Thanks for having me.
So Megan, I will come to you first because you've got a very different perspective here. And we're going to start by talking about the Giants and the MLB, but then we'll zoom out and have a broader conversation here as well. What exactly is your issue with what was done to the 3 players who wrote on the Bible verse? They got this warning, no official punishment, but that they were told they violated this policy. Do you see this as anti-Christian discrimination?
What I see it as, Brad, is unequal accommodation. So essentially, what we had here is a league that has taken a position on an extremely divisive social issue. So when you look at everything represented in that pride flag, obviously we know that a lot of Americans don't agree with a lot of what is represented in that flag. And so when these players chose not to wear the standard pride gear, and I just want to point out that the MLB does do themed uniforms for other issues, but it's things like, childhood cancer, Mother's Day. So they are not divisive social issues. The only divisive social issue in the MLB for which they have these kind of themed uniforms is pride. And so when these players chose to not just not wear the uniforms, but to put that verse on their hat, they were trying to express something. Because if you're going to take a position like that, you have to allow additional accommodation for these players to express their conscientious objection to what is being done in their name. So what they did was they wrote a verse on their hats. Almost every single one chose, I believe, the passage in Genesis where it talks about the Lord making a covenant with man that he's never going to destroy the earth again via flood. And so he puts his rainbow in the sky. And I think that's really significant because what we're getting from the players is that they have to be able to communicate why they're not going to wear that uniform, because a lot of assumptions could be made about why they're not wearing it. We could assume they're not wearing it because they hate gay identifying people, or, they think men who dress up as women are just gross. So what they wanted to do was signal that's not why we're not wearing it. And I think we have seen a media that will very helpfully extract lessons from these choices. These players were saying, we're not going to let you sort of write in our names over us why we chose not to wear those uniforms. We're going to tell you why we chose not to wear those uniforms.
But you acknowledge they weren't forced to, because there have been many cases or some cases where players are like, or in different situations or cultural or business contexts where people are forced to affirm, LGBT, whatever. This was not the case. They had the option to simply wear their regular uniform. You acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, I do absolutely acknowledge that. But I will also acknowledge that on the occasions where the league waded into a hot button issue in the past, it did allow for a suspension of those normal equipment rules. For example, with Black Lives Matter back in 2020, they allowed players to write on their cleats or to add patches to their uniforms that signaled their allegiance to Black Lives Matter. So in this case, we have players essentially doing the same thing, saying, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm not going to, make a fuss with the media. I'm not going to give fiery interviews denouncing my league. But what I am going to do is quietly and conscientiously signal that I don't align with the messaging that my league is putting out. Because let's be clear, there is also no other social issue in which, at the start of the month, you get big announcements from MLB that, hey, we support this cause, even though, for example, only 5% of Republicans would say that changing gender is moral. So that's the kind of thing that's represented in that flag, that a vast majority of not just Republicans, but all Americans, only 38% of Americans believe that it's moral to change your gender. So it's reasonable to say we need additional accommodations to express ourselves if you are advocating for this in our names.
Okay, we can come back to that point, but I want to bring in Luke here. Give us your take and maybe whatever you think you want to respond to there.
I just feel so bad. Megan, would you categorize yourself as like MAGA?
That's not a label that I've ever
Did you vote
used
for Trump?
myself. I did vote for him, though, yes.
Okay.
But I don't characterize myself as MAGA because I think MAGA tends to endorse anything Donald Trump does, and that's certainly not been me.
Well, then I'll put it as people in right-wing media and right-wing online spaces. I almost feel bad for y'all because it must feel so depressing to cling on to. And I don't know how much you participate. I know you got asked to participate in this particular debate about this topic, but I don't know how much online otherwise you jumped into the mix on this. But whoever is stoking
I jump
any
into
discourse,
everything online, so
well,
I
there it
probably
is.
jumped in some.
So, yeah, anyone who wastes time, given the issues that we're facing, caring like even a little bit. I only heard about this because I saw it in some Twitter argument. Never would it be something that would cross my mind or bother me. And as was laid out in the intro, and even you acknowledge, like there really is no issue here. They have a rule against writing on your uniforms. You didn't have to wear the pride thing if you didn't want to wear it. And once again, we have a movement that used to have a little bit more cultural credibility because Democrats had a lot of power. So it was sort of like, we're fighting back against the power structure that is trying to change our culture and make us all weird and woke. And now y'all have all the power and everything's kind of going to hell and Trump's excruciatingly unpopular and Republicans are probably going to be wiped out in the midterms. So then it's funny to watch y'all grasp to these sort of random
Why
culture
do you
war
assume
issues.
that
Well, I'll
it's
finish.
grasping
I'll let you
and
go
it's
for a while
not a
uninterrupted.
sincere
Megan,
religious
Megan,
objection?
I'm gonna finish, and then I'll answer
Yeah,
that.
well, let
Yeah,
Luke
yeah.
briefly conclude. Yeah.
Oh, because I've watched this, Megan, for I guess decade plus of the effort to distract from much more consequential issues with the most obscure nonsense things that don't impact a large portion of people's lives, whether or not they have a pride flag or they don't, or they put a verse or they don't, or there's a rule against Sharpie on the uniforms or there's not, has no bearing in people's lives. But the same movement that gets supporters by riling people up on those issues has now got a bunch of power and is screwing everybody over
So I'll
economically,
bring Megan
foreign
back in
policy,
here,
and
and
otherwise.
I will just say that I have noticed this outside looking in. The 5 alarm fire in conservative media about this MLB story has been striking because even if it was everything that conservatives say that it is, at least in my view, I mean, there's still a lot going on in the world. I'm not quite so sure it deserves the outsized attention it has gotten. But Megan, why have you and other conservative
Okay,
commentators
yeah,
focused
2
on this so
points
much?
here. One, that is sort of a wild position to take when you yourselves brought this issue to the forefront by saying we should
Who?
have these themed pride events. I'm saying the gay lobby, the LGBTQ lobby, and
Oh,
those who
yes.
support the
I am the
LGBTQ
CEO
lobby.
of such thing. Yes.
No, but you have already signaled in this interview that you endorse their efforts and a lot of what that movement is endeavoring to see done. And one of the things they endeavored to see done were these kind of social advocacy programs within Major League Baseball. Let me finish.
Yeah,
And
hang
the
on.
point to that, Brad, is we
I
did
was
not bring
breathing.
this to. I saw
Sure,
the
go
video
ahead, Megan.
up.
Sorry, go ahead.
So my point being that this was not brought to the door of Christians. It's not like there was a vote and they went, okay, look, we won the vote on whether or not there should be these kind of corporate allegiance to the LGBTQ movement that so many Americans disagree with. So once MLB said, okay, we're now going to take this position, they opened the door to this. So it's very convenient to say, oh, this is an unimportant issue. It's trivial. Why are you making such a big deal of it? Well, if there were no Pride Night, if there were no Pride Month, if there were no Pride uniforms, then we wouldn't be sitting here having this debate.
USA is killing it in the World Cup, but just how far could they actually go? If you ask me, I doubt they'll actually win it, but I think they could make a run, and apparently a lot of people agree. According to our channel partners at Kalshi, 30% of people think the US could make the quarterfinals, the final 8, while 25% of people think they'll be eliminated after the round of 32. Following the World Cup, I'm loving it to have everybody paying attention to soccer for once in America, and if you're enjoying it as well, there's really no better way to follow along with the action than with the Kalshi app. You can see the markets adjust in real time. Kalshi is the first CFTC-regulated exchange dedicated to predicting the outcome of future events, including soccer matches or football matches. And if you sign up today, just get the app on your phone or head to Kalshi's website and use code BRADP. You'll get $20 when you trade $20 today. Now back to the show.
The reason that we're having it is because there are those Pride uniforms and the players are asked to wear them. So then the players have a decision to make. Do I not wear it at all and allow the media to interpret that however they want? Or do I not wear it and make a public statement? Or do I wear it, but then signal, hey, for me, the rainbow means something different. And the reason I'm not wearing this hat is not because I hate you or I think you're gross. In fact, I'm a Christian, so I love you and I want the best for you and for every member of my society. But I'm not going to wear this hat for this reason. So you have to
let me
give them
ask you
that
about that
accommodation.
because
But also
sure. Okay.
minimizing this, I just want to add, you're saying it's trivial. It's not trivial. It is a question that our nation actually thought was a very important question at its founding. And that is, how important is this issue of freedom of speech and free expression? Now, I understand that this is a private organization, so we're not talking about government censorship, but it's become an increasing issue when we have corporations drafting their employees into being a part of a broader social movement, and that's what they've done.
So I guess I would just wonder though, they also have a faith night, right? And there's players on there who are
Mhm.
atheists, and if they have the option to opt out, I'm not sure I would characterize it as them being drafted into it. I take your point that this was kind of brought up by the corporations going in on all of this stuff. Certainly, I personally have been not a fan of that for a long time. But Megan, I do wonder, you're framing it as if like, well, they had to write the Bible verses on their uniforms to make it clear why they were opposing this. Um, why didn't they seek authorization? Because you brought up BLM, for example. I mean, I agree with you. That's a bit of an inconsistency, but those were authorized exceptions in advance that they got to be allowed to do that. Exceptions from the
Do you
policy.
think they would have gotten that authorization?
I
I mean,
actually I don't
does the
know.
MLB's prior behavior indicate to you that given the statement that they made about these players, and let's be clear, the AP, the New York Times, they didn't actually distinguish between, hey, these players believe this and these players believe that, and that's why some didn't wear the uniform and some wore the uniform but wrote a Bible verse. They lumped them all together, saying these players didn't participate in Pride Night, and the MLB then put out a statement saying, we apologize for how hurtful this was to the LGBT community. Now, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember their
But
exact
Megan,
language
all I'm
verbatim,
saying is
but
that
this was their point.
all I'm saying is that
Hey,
Sure. I'll come to you in 1 second, Luke. But all I'm saying is that they could have put out a statement on their own right, on their own social media. And if they had requested that exception and then had it denied, I think they would be in a stronger case to claim discrimination. But Luke, I'll bring you in here to respond to what's been said.
it's funny because this is companies. Yeah, companies are going to try to show support for. Megan, in your little sector of the internet, you have like a archetype for what pride advocacy is or what the pride flag means. And like anytime you see a
What
rainbow,
is
you get a
my
little
little
gayer.
sector of the internet? Wait, can you be a little
I
more
don't know,
specific,
the
Luke, on
one
what is my little
the
sector of
one
the
where your
internet?
blood boils over some MLB thing I never even heard about because I was too worried about the war that Trump started that's hurting the global economy and getting us into a geopolitical fiasco. But
That's also a
I
legitimate
do.
issue to
It's
discuss.
also like I didn't even hear any liberals talking about this until it was a reaction to. But I know that's kind of like anecdotal. I'm
Well, there
sure there are
was
people out there
in
who are
San
yelling about
Francisco,
There was a
Scott
lot of
Wiener
media
and
coverage
everybody.
of these
right.
players
I'm just telling
who
you. I'm just telling you
objected.
that I did so good, Megan, not talking. I breathed a little loudly, but then I stopped. So let me go.
Sorry, you're right. Sorry.
So what I see is, oh, that's cool. Corporations want to show. They're not weeding into every detail of like, when can this discussion come up in school and blah, blah, blah. They're just saying, we acknowledge that for generations, people based on literally who they wanted to be in love with were in some case killed, were demonized, were outcasted. Massive rates of homeless children, Megan, are on the streets without family because they get kicked out of their house just for their sexual orientation. Hey, we're showing solidarity. We'll slap a pride flag. I guess it's one night now, maybe not even the whole month, to show, yeah, in general, we're with you. This isn't, everyone's not so internet brained where they're wading into a big debate over what do you think we should teach in 5th grade about blah, 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 blah. They're just saying in general, there was a fight, a very righteous fight that of course has been culture warized, and we can have those debates and some of those specifics some people on the left go a little wacky on, for sure. But the broader message of acceptance and support, you said you don't believe the message coming from the baseball players or from you is like, we don't want the best for you. We do want the best for you. Well, not really, depending on what you support on this, how many rights you support for people, what type of treatment that you would allow, or if you are as outraged about homeless children because of them being kicked out by right-wing Christian parents as you are about like this MLB issue.
Well, let's not change the
Okay,
topic
so
totally to
I
that
want to
issue.
take, yeah, I'm
But
happy to take each of your points
I'm
in
just
order.
going to say to Luke, and then I'm going to turn over to Megan. It has been associated in part through the fault of the LGBT activism itself with a whole host of controversial issues, like athletes, like kids transitioning. It's like
right.
that is a real issue and is very controversial to people. And the LGBT activists and progressives lump that in.
That's fine.
With,
okay.
with,
So don't.
so
hey,
it's not necessarily niche.
progressives. Hey, progressives. Stop it. Don't do that.
No, Megan, I'll give you a chance to respond.
No,
here.
wait. Actually, you said something to me. I'm being dead
Sure,
serious, by
okay,
the way.
yeah.
There
What-
are things people attach that make it harder to make the case when they start stretching the bounds of what we're advocating for. I'm not a partisan hack. I engage with those issues all the time and see the nuances of where our advocacy becomes disruptive and not, and where I disagree with other people who would say they're a part of the same LGBTQ advocacy group, but actually say things that don't make sense to me. But I'm just trying to make a broader point so that the audience understands and so that we pick up on these trends, that every time it gets really bad for the Republican Party and the right-wing movement that's becoming really unpopular, they go and they grab for something that's not actually impacting a lot of Americans' lives, but is salacious and will get them some political
Okay, Megan, your
ammo.
response.
Okay, yeah, I want to take all of your points sort of one by one. So, first to Brad, this question of, well, there's also, a Christian celebration night. Well, it's actually different in character than the Pride Month celebrations. For one thing, there aren't special uniforms for Christian night. And usually what they are is sort of an ancillary event that is tied to the game. So, you're not going to see players out on the mound with, cross hats. So, that signals a difference in commitment to these two different kind of events within MLB. So I want to acknowledge that we're talking about something that is more a side, let's say, branding and advertising approach to say you can buy block tickets with your church because it's going to be Christian night, as opposed to we, the league, are celebrating you and what you believe. So it's very different in nature. And then going to Luke's point, what you did there, Luke, was you assumed that what's not important to you can't be important to anybody. So you are saying, okay, this is the position that I
No,
take.
that's not what I'm
And you
doing.
are saying, look, this is trivial. It's
Look at
a
polls.
very
Megan,
unimportant
what
issue.
poll places this at the
Therefore,
top?
okay, no.
Yeah.
So you're saying it is therefore, because it is
Economy,
unimportant to
Pride
me,
night.
Christians should not be able to speak out on it. And we as Christians
You can speak
hold
out on
different
it.
things in our head. We can sit here and say, hey, we have these concerns about the economy. We have these concerns about the war in Iran. And we have these concerns about fundamental social issues in our country that are reflected by that pride flag. I mean, these are the most fundamental debates about what it means to be human, what it means to be a mother or a father, what it means to be male and female. So you are suggesting that, these are really trivial questions, and they're not. They're some of the most fundamental questions that
No.
go
Well, so
to
let's
what
hang
does
on.
I gotta
marriage look
respond to
like?
that, Brad.
What does
Okay,
parenthood
briefly,
look
then we're
like?
going to move on.
Yeah, so real briefly, I'm not saying the issues surrounding LGBTQ are trivial. I'm saying us debating over what should they have written on a ball cap or something are trivial. And then I'm trying to press on, you work for the Daily Wire, right? Like the
Mhm.
Daily Wire and these right-wing orgs, oh my gosh, the stuff they have done to distract people like during the 2024 election from every economist you could
Okay,
find.
but you
that's,
just did it again. You're
Megan,
saying
I let you
distract.
speak.
You interrupted
I
me
let
as
you
well.
speak.
No, you interrupted me,
All right,
so I'm going to
guys,
just kind of break in
guys.
on this point.
So finish your point about the Daily Wire briefly, then I'll give Megan a chance to
I'm gonna
respond, then we'll
finish
move
it.
on.
Just pretty effectively. Wait. So my point is, I watched it. Hundreds of economists were coming out like Trump's economic plan is going to be terrible. And meanwhile, Daily Wire's over here like, oh, look, but Kamala one time said something about trans prisoners. And it duped people into picking a guy who's going to be worse for most people's well-being. We could have
Do
still had.
you
Wait,
think they can
oh my gosh,
legitimately
Megan.
believe this is an important issue?
So
No, I want you to
disrespectful.
answer this. Do you believe?
I'm about to
Look,
answer
it's
that
not as
question. I'm getting
disrespectful
to it,
as treating
Megan.
everything as a sneer. Can they
I'm
legitimately
warning
believe that these are
people
real issues?
of whenever organizations like the Daily Wire have you distract from things that we could all unite around to make all of our lives better, and instead say we should be screaming all day about culture issues, you should be taking note of that, cautious of it. And then to your point, it's not that these issues aren't important. They're also important. I don't know if the baseball thing is, but like the broader thing, to your point. And yeah, I would love to engage on, last time I was on Polumbo's show, there was a guy debating against like gay marriage, and we were grappling through that, and he had a hard time explaining his point. But I do think these are important issues. My emphasis here is there's a trend whenever things get bad, as I explained before, for Republicans. And if we don't notice that, they're going to keep getting us in this dupe. And this year it's going to be drag queens. The next year it's going to be books and libraries. And they'll never focus on the foundational issues that you and I, Megan, I think could actually unite on if we cared about improving all Americans' lives.
I'm going to give Megan a brief chance. Her employer was impugned here. A brief chance to have a final word on that in defense of
all the staff
Daily
there
Wire.
were great to me, by the way, when I did the debate. So I do want to say that.
And then I'm going to shift us along a little bit here, zoom out the conversation. But Megan, sure, a word in response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Luke is sort of doing the debate by sneer approach. So he's just kind of sitting over there rolling his eyes over things that we do consider important. You can think that it's unimportant, but for those of us who do take this position, it is not something that, we're engaging in as a debate topic just to annoy you or to try to deflect. I mean, maybe there are some people out there that are doing it to deflect from the Iran war, but I'm certainly not. These are positions that I have always taken. I have written about them extensively, as far back as 2000. 2006 when I first got out of college and started writing about these issues. And I think that's the same thing for everyone at Daily Wire, that yes, we believe those other issues you brought up are important, but this issue is also important. And one other thing I want to go to in terms of your dismissing that these players actually do want the best for gay identifying individuals, notice the verse that they chose. They could have chosen some of the abomination passages. They could have been really provocative if they wanted to be provocative. They didn't do that, though. They chose a passage that honored God, but was not meant to be intentionally offensive
I don't
to
have any problem with that, Megan.
LGBTQ identifying individuals.
Okay.
So I'm
You keep
making that
saying-
point. But you are
You keep
saying
arguing against someone who's not
what
part
you're
of you.
saying is that it's not
we're gonna move along.
important.
Sorry,
No,
sorry,
you
we're gonna move
continue to
along.
say that it's not important that they care about it, and it's
Well,
stupid that they care about it.
did not
And
say
I'm telling you,
sorry, guys,
it
I'm
is
going to
legitimate.
transition us here.
Brad,
Sorry,
Megan
no.
is lying. I didn't say their beliefs
literally,
aren't important.
people can rewind. I mean,
Megan,
you've been
can
rolling your eyes
rewind.
at the fact
I
that they
said-
think it's an issue.
Yes, well, I'm not going to be mischaracterized, so I do have to explain what you're lying about, which is that I'm saying the way that these niche debates, not about the broader issue, but about should they have been allowed to write it on their cap, is a distraction effort. The underlying
But
issue.
that is
let's
an
debate it, Megan. I
outward
think-
reflection of the debate. That's the outward
Brad-
reflection of the debate that we're having.
Brad, I
how
think it's
it
about-
That's fine.
manifests
Megan.
That's
itself
fine.
in all
We're
numbers
gonna
of
so
social
we're gonna
issues.
zoom out the
Brad,
debate now.
no,
Sorry.
Nope. He's
Yes.
about to zoom out. We'll get to the issues themselves. That's great. But don't mischaracterize how important
right.
I think the larger
That's
things
fine.
are.
People can rewind if they want to
Sharpies aren't.
review that characterization. So we've talked a lot about like Pride Month and the backlash to it and how far that is going. And so, Megan, I want to ask you about something that you recently posted. So you were very bothered by I forget who posted the original post, but it was some kind of pro-Pride Month post from a Republican politician, maybe Mike Lawler. And the journalist from The Atlantic, Connor Friedersdorf, asked you, what specifically is it that you would want to stop tolerating? For example, if you could, would you criminalize sodomy again? To which you replied, yes. I'd just like to get clarity on that. Like, you would recriminalize homosexuality.
I mean, if I could wave my magic wand as the Queen of the United States, I would. But I understand that,
Want
given
the
the
best
republic
for
that
me.
we live in, it would be incredibly difficult to get a majority of the electorate to back that position at this stage. But I think it's perfectly legitimate to regulate sexual behavior between consenting adults when we recognize that it has social harms. And Scalia was absolutely right that what happened in the overturning of that Texas sodomy law was that it ushered in then Obergefell, which then ushered in a redefining of what parenthood means. So it wasn't just redefining what marriage as a relationship means, but what parenthood means. So that is why we saw those dominoes fall. And we can't acknowledge that, look, it's not about same-sex attraction, but it is that there are societal harms with sodomy that we do not find with other types of sex acts.
Such as what, Megan?
So you will have 17 times the rate of HIV transmission in receptive anal sex than you do with vaginal sex. The anus, bluntly, is not a sexual organ. It doesn't self-lubricate. It doesn't have the elasticity of a vagina. So it is a different type of sexual act that creates
Megan.
social harms.
So
I'm
hang
sorry,
on. I'd
these
like
are
to ask,
facts.
yes, they are. And Luke, I will come to you, but I have to ask a couple clarifying questions. Do you consider yourself a proponent of individual freedom or of human freedom? Because what you're describing to me sounds like you are an enemy of human freedom. If you want a sex police, if you want people's literal policing
Brad,
of
is it
people's
legitimate
bedrooms.
to outlaw prostitution? Should we outlaw prostitution?
I personally don't think so. No, I do not.
Well, that's consistent then. So you would say we do not have a right to regulate sexual activity that the broader populace would agree, okay, that's a social harm.
I believe there has
also-
to be a
That's also
victim in
regulating
order for
commerce
there to be
too.
a
It's
crime.
different, but yeah.
But Megan, I will ask you this, and I think this is fair game. Have you ever
I wanna
engaged in oral sex with a man?
Yes, of course I have. I'm married.
So you've
and,
committed
we
sodomy.
as two. No, I have not
That
committed
is sodomy.
You asked
That
me
is
if I
under
committed
many
oral
definitions
sex.
of sodomy.
No, by a
oral sex
biblical
is sodomy.
definition or a historical definition, that is not sodomy.
But the purpose
That's
of
oral
sex
So
is
they are
for
two different
procreation.
acts.
So non-procreational sex is sodomy. So it
No,
is
you just put
hypocritical
words
to
in
say
my
you want
mouth.
to
Wait,
criminalize sodomy,
Brad.
but you've
You
done
just
it.
put words in my mouth. I have never said that sex is purely for procreation. I'm a Christian. I believe in what my creator tells me sex is for, and procreation is one of its purposes, but so is enjoying marriage and being bonded in marriage. So this is
Quote,
one of the functions that marriage is useful for.
sodomy is a legal and theological term that generally refers to anal or oral sexual contact between humans.
I have no idea what you're reading from, and so I would say this is not a definition I agree
Google.
with, and I think we can all. Okay,
The
so
Bible? No.
I don't agree with Google's definition, and it's actually not the biblical definition, Luke.
That's
I
why
mean,
I chuckled.
the
I know.
Bible is fairly, which is fine. But my point being, if you
But-
want to argue about how do we define sodomy, fine. I will
Okay,
say
so
that
you're
my
saying but.
definition is anal
Butt stuff.
penetration.
Okay, anal penetration. Okay, well, that's weird. Do you want to be like the sodomy police? I'm just picturing you going around.
No, I
Is
mean,
there
I
any-
just
any
told
butt
you.
stuff in this room? No. So I understand that you're
This
saying
is
it's
not an issue that I've
I'll get
become an
serious now.
activist on. Someone
Yeah.
asked me a question and I
You
answered
were
it.
honest.
That's all
and
that
I appreciate
happened.
that. I appreciate that. So actually, what you're advocating for is a less safe, more stigmatized, more people dying from diseases world. That's what you actually want, based on the.
No, I actually want a
Wait, I'm
world
gonna-
where they would die
Megan,
less from diseases,
let
which is
you
part
Let's
of
say-
let
the
Luke
reason that
speak
I
for a
oppose
moment,
it.
because
I
you've
let
got
y'all
to flesh
talk
out your
about
position.
BJ's, and I didn't say anything. I'm gonna go. So what happens here, Megan, is that people since the beginning of time have been having homosexual relationships. You're not going to stop that, but if you care about the spread of disease, with certain diseases having higher rates, because like you said, the biological realities or whatever of the anal cavity, then you would encourage people to you would destigmatize these issues, so there's more of an awareness of how to be safe, and there's more treatment, and there's more prevention, and more care given to preventing diseases from spreading. It's what I talked about last time I was on this show. Very similar with gay marriage. You guys will scream about like, oh, we're against it, not because we don't want people to be in love, but because number one, we're against homosexuality, but then also it's about the kids. We want to make sure the kids are raised. We're against same-sex parents raising kids, but then every single batch of research I could find, kids in same-sex homes turn out just as good, if not better, than those in opposite-sex homes. The outcomes are, again, just as good, if not better, for some reason in random cases, probably because of average income of homosexual relationships. And then you have the reality that people are going to be in relationships with each other. Like, that's just going to happen, gay relationships. And so we can choose to encourage people to be in safe and even committed relationships. That's why marriage as an institution the government backs with same-sex marriage is so helpful, because it actually increases the well-being of children in same-sex homes. It stabilizes the relationship. It improves the prosperity of the couple and the family. All that we're talking about is either there's going to be same-sex relationships, but the well-being of the entire society and of children and of the adult will be worse, or there's still same-sex relationships, but we add institutional backing to stabilize them, to make them more committed, to be stronger and more protected for children, and for more awareness about how to be safe and happy and healthy.
Okay, I want to give Megan a chance to respond.
Okay, so one of the things you said there is that, we have had homosexuality in practice and in desire forever, and that's absolutely true. I would never deny that. That's part of the reason, there are commands way back in Leviticus about how do we respond to these desires and these practices. My point being that we have forever, as societies, also outlawed other practices that we today still outlaw, like polygamy, like prostitution, like bestiality, like cousin marriage. There is a whole host of, various sexual practices between consenting adults, or
Well,
in the case of
bestiality, not quite.
Yeah. You could at least argue there may be a way to do this without, harming the animal. So if the question is whether or not we're talking about, which you can both sit there and sort of sneer and roll your eyes,
No, that's
but
just
it's a
funny.
legitimate
It's
point
okay.
that there
Yeah.
are a variety of sexual practices
Some
that
of those
we as a
zebras.
society
Shit.
recognize
Well, hang on, Luke. Hang on. I mean, so
are-
Megan, I don't mean
unhelpful
to.
and harmful societal practices. So my question to both of you, would you outlaw polygamy, or would you say, no, these are consenting adults. If they want to have a contractual marriage relationship between multiple people, should they be allowed to do that?
Luke.
Was that to
I'm
me?
asking both of you.
So what's interesting is I'm talking about homosexuality because of its prevalence,
right.
because of its importance, because of its history. And it's interesting that you shift off of that, because I'm talking about research that I have. I don't have, wait, Megan, I don't have
It's
a
a
bunch of
question of
research
principle.
on-
I'm
I don't-
asking you as a question of principle.
but my principles are informed by data, Megan, and I don't have data on how happy zebras are in relationships with humans or whatever. I do have a lot of data on how societies improve. Like, for example, when we legalized gay marriage, there were already kids in same-sex homes for all different reasons, but then childhood poverty in those homes and childhood outcomes in those homes improved after the legalization of same-sex marriage. So I'm looking at data, comparing that to the reality on the ground, the importance of these issues, and then picking the best policy solution in a government that is secular.
So, Megan, I'll
Okay,
answer
and
your
I would,
question
yeah,
because you also
okay.
directed it at me. What I would say is polygamy, in terms of recognizing marriage, I think is a distinct question from what we were talking about, which was the legality of sexual behavior. And I certainly would
True.
not want to criminalize polyamory sexual activity. For apple, do I personally think it's a good idea? Do I tell some of my gay friends who occasionally engage in that kind of thing, or my straight friends to do it? No. Do I think it's a criminal matter? Because no, again, I don't believe in victimless crimes between consenting adults. So that's my position
And I
on
actually
that.
take a consistent position that I would say, the no-fault divorce laws that we enacted way back in the 60s, I think the LGBTQ activists who have said that, hey, why did you guys not oppose this more vociferously if you oppose redefining marriage in 2015? I think that was a legitimate argument. So I would consistently say in both of those cases, the state had an interest in what is best for children. And what is best for children is to live with their biological mother and father. And the only reason that the state should or should not recognize marriages in the first place is so that they can ensure that the best environment for raising children and the child's welfare is what is enshrined in saying we recognize marriage for this purpose. So the purpose is not to just bless adult romantic attachments. If that's the case, then there is no reason for the state to be involved in it at all. And at that point, I would say maybe I would agree with you, Brad, but when we're talking about polyamory or polygamy, I'm talking about contracts between individuals. So the reason that we don't
Right.
allow it is because we understand that it develops chaos, that it creates a chaotic relationship about who does this child belong to, what happens when this child lives in a house
Okay,
with many multiple
we don't have, I'm sorry,
partners.
but we don't have time to open up a rabbit hole of marriage policy and the
Wait.
whole marriage debate. No, I'm sorry, Luke. So
But
what
all of these things are part and parcel about
I
why we
understand they are
regulate marriage
connected.
at all.
But also the idea of the slippery slope, meaning that you have to have one thing or everything, is obviously not true, or rolling back
But
DEI
we've
would
seen how
require
the
putting
slippery
Rosa in the back of the
it
bus.
is true. It
It
obviously
is literally
true.
not true.
And it's part of the reason that we have seen a
Wait,
crash out in
Brad,
support for
you just said I
from
couldn't go, and now
Republicans
she's going again.
Well,
for gay
This is
marriage.
out of control. Megan.
hang on.
Well, I mean, to be
Luke,
fair, I'm
me
debating
go.
two of you. So
No, I agree.
Well,
That's why I'm letting you
it's-
talk a lot.
I'm sorry, but Megan, can I just say though that it is
Brad.
it is under. Well, I will give you another chance to speak, and we have a few more minutes to discuss this. It is not an easy position to be in where you're speaking with someone who wants to make you illegal, basically your life as it exists, make your family.
No. I don't want to make you illegal, Brad. I
Yes,
don't.
you want to make my life
do
as
not
it exists.
No.
My family
I don't
illegal.
accept
Yes.
the Freudian
My partner
definition
and I have been together
of gay
for 7 years.
identifying
We
as
live together
being
happily. We have
part
built a
of your
whole life
inherent
together.
identity.
You would make it illegal, and that's very
No.
difficult conversation to have. You would
Here's
absolutely.
what you need to hear. I mean, you're asking me if I would outlaw the practice of sodomy,
right?
which
Sex.
has
You want the sex
societal
police
harms.
to break up my household.
I actually
Correct.
don't
There's no
define that as
societal
sex
harm.
because, again,
What
that
is the
does- it
societal
doesn't-
harm from my relationship with my partner?
So we've been over this. We've been over what happened with Obergefell and that
No, specifically to
Scalia
me.
was
What's the
entirely
societal
right.
harm?
The societal harm to you is if you and your partner, who have now been per Obergefell, once it changed the definition of marriage to this is
We're not
something that
married,
we are
actually,
now.
but sure.
I know, but I'm making the point. So if you're not married, then that's a different question. But if you're saying, why should we, what is your position on gay marriage? Do you think that it
I
is
support
correct or
gay marriage,
incorrect?
but don't shift to that. You're
This
talking
was
about making sodomy illegal. For me to have a relationship with my partner, we live together, leave marriage, leave kids out of
Mhm.
it. What is the social harm? You keep saying there's a social harm to that because the harm
Are
to
there
me would be enormous of having to live a life in the closet, of potentially marrying a woman I'm
The
incapable of
social
loving.
harm was when that law was overturned. Scalia quite rightly predicted this is
That's
going
a
to quickly
constitutional
follow
debate.
No, it's a question. The constitutional debate was what societal harm could result from us taking this step of invalidating the Texas law. And
So you
he
can't name a
predicted
societal
what
harm. You
will
can only
happen.
name consequences down the line from
No,
other
I
things.
named societal harms. I said there is an
Of my
increase in
relationship,
disease.
what is the societal
Gay men-
harm? There's no transition
You-
of disease in a monogamous relationship.
But here's the thing, Brad. You know and I know that gay male relationships are almost never monogamous.
Well, that's not true. Almost never is not true. And then your issue is not with this. It's with non-monogamy.
Gay partnerships have an astronomical rate of open marriages.
Now do lesbians, right? Like it's the opposite for them, but you have the same position.
Right, and they have the greatest level of divorce. So again, in both of these situations,
gay men get divorced less than straight couples do.
We have really limited research because it's only been in practice for 10 years.
When you like it.
So no, it's 10. It's been 10 years.
It's been longer than that. That's just national. But Luke, I do have to bring in Luke. I give you a final chance to say whatever you want to say, and then we are running out of time. I do very much appreciate the spirited conversation, and I don't mean to treat you with any disrespect, Megan. I just would say that it would imagine yourself in a conversation with someone who wants to effectively criminalize Christianity. It is a challenging conversation to have, but I thank you for participating in it. Luke, final word to you.
Well, that's what's tough is I agree with Brad that I enjoy these debates, and for some reason I don't really get offended at all if someone has the view that you do, Megan, even though if I think about a third person observing it, and what you're effectively saying is both Brad and I should go to jail in your perfect world for the love that we have with our partners.
Outlawing doesn't always involve jail. We recognize that, right?
Okay. Or we should be punished.
Okay.
We should be punished for, in both of our cases, really happy and monogamous relationships that we're in. And then it's so interesting to watch. I guess it kind of demonstrates how weak your argument is. You unable to stick on that issue and then defend it powerfully. It has to go to, because then, and the funny part is that your slippery slope doesn't even slip you.
I think that's a tactic because you don't argue your points, Luke. You just argue that mine are bad, but you do not argue proactively positive points.
Do you know
You're
why?
just kind of sitting over there eye rolling at mine.
I'll tell you. Please stop interrupting me, though, because I let you go for a while. I'll just say I actually argued my points, which is that here's what happens whenever you, with public policy, support committed relationships, contractual relationships between people who would already be in relationships. It does this positive thing for the kids. It does this positive thing for the family. It does this positive thing for their prosperity. I made my argument, but also you're the one who's advocating for taking a freedom away. I actually do think you have the burden of proof, and I'm still giving you affirmative reasons I have my position, but you're the one who has the burden of proof because we're in a country that prides our freedom, and you're saying there should be a certain freedom that's so intimate, it is in privacy that you want to go get the government into. So yes, it actually is your burden of proof. But I did explain that in your perfect world, even if we stick on gay marriage, since you keep wanting to slide there, I just explained to you that that would only harm children in same-sex homes, harm the couples, harm our societal support for committed relationships, but the relationships would still be there. There would just be less stability and prosperity. Okay.
Sorry. All right. I appreciate both of you. We are significantly over our time frame here. I thank you very much for coming on and for the spirited debate. Megan Basham, Luke Beasley, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Megan.
All right, guys, that's it for today's debate. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're new here. Regardless, hit the like button. If you made it this far, you must have enjoyed something about this video. And regardless, we'll be back with more real soon.